Hello, welcome to Painting by Letters. My name's Hannes, and today we're going to begin the task of fixing my Necrons. When I got back into the hobby, I picked up some Necrons. To be honest with you, when I initially restarted, I actually did so with the Eldari. Eldar plus copyrightable name? Well, at least when the codex came out. I saw it advertised. As I was planning to sell my Warhammer, I'd actually gone to my parents' house and picked it all up out the garage. I was going to list it on eBay. Back then I didn't really earn that much, money was quite tight, and that seemed like a good method to recoup some money. I, however, saw the codex listed and had a moment of, weakness, something like that, when I remembered loving the Eldar. So I bought the codex and actually realised my army was no longer legal. I fixed this by paying the troop tax, like all Eldar players have always done through all ages. However, it really didn't inspire me much. I actually enjoyed the relaxation, and some difficult times were beginning, but it did not give me really that much, all said. At the same time, a friend of mine recommended the novel The Infinite and the Divine. Last time I was into Warhammer, the Necrons were mostly still considered robot slaves. The retcon had sort of happened, but wasn't really that embedded yet. So this was a bit of a trial by fire into the new lore, which I hadn't really interacted with at all, even when I used to play in about 6th edition or so, although I started earlier than that. When I was a kid, however, I loved the idea of the Necrons, and I really wanted a monolith, and their aesthetic always looked cool. So I thought, sod it, and on one rather depressing and drunk evening, I found a copy of Indomitus on Facebook Marketplace. It cost me £40. I'm sorry, I feel bad. To be fair to myself, I was very honest with the seller that they probably could get £200+ I thought on eBay. I didn't really know at the time, it was a bit of a mix here and there. And their response was, and I'm going to quote now, I literally went and found the message, just to quote, "I do not care, John needs to learn a lesson." I'm sorry, John. I hope you're well. So there I was, with my Necrons, and cast into the world I dreamed of as a kid. Painting the Necron half of the box was brilliant fun. Then I went to continue buying a set of Immortals, some Wraiths. It was really great fun. I was properly relaxing, I was getting into it, I was enjoying the audiobooks. This was a moment of great exploration and fun. And then I bought the Doomsday Arc. This is where things really kind of go wrong. It's not the Doomsday Arc's fault. I think the model's really quite cool. I like the way that it looks. And to be fair, it wasn't even that hard to paint, despite looking monstrous to begin with. I mean, I love this thing, but I also hate it. I built it in 3 sub-assemblies. I also built it upside down. It was intentional at the time. I much prefer it this way round, but yeah, I did build it upside down. I got a can of silver primer. I was thinking that's a winner. I can prime and paint the base coat at the same time. And then my hope died. So I won't say the brand, but I now understand that there was a defective batch of primer. Would have been nice to know that at the time. It went on heavy even with a light dusting. It eroded detail. It covered everything with a horrific chemical covering. So I decided to strip and start again. I thought this was an issue with application. Stripping, however, was a nightmare. This paint did not want to come off. 3 weeks in a bath of Dettol meant I could just about take it off. Whatever that chemical coating was, seemingly had really locked stuff in. I found the only way to really get at it seemed to be to sort of chip the paint a little bit, and then the stripper sort of could get in a bit. and then eventually I managed to get it all off. And so I thought, right, it's definitely my fault. Maybe the weather was wrong, too humid, you know, I was having to do it outside. We were living in quite a small flat, so I was doing it in the back garden. Maybe, you know, something had gone wrong. So I thought, I'll just go and respray it. It's a reputable brand, no problem. Yep, it was the same list of problems, but much, much worse. Yeah, so I gave up. I moved house, changed job, put my Warhammer in a box for 3 months, and got it out the other week. I decided it would not beat me. I'm actually really glad I did. I loved the painting process. But here's another problem. My army's a very specific colour scheme. Metal with a green accent and red weapons. However, this is metal with a blue accent, some small green bits, and red weapons again. They don't match. So here's the plan. Let's fix my army. I said in the intro video to the channel that I really would like to make my Necrons fit with maybe a Trazyn HQ or something like that. So let's make the army match the arc, not the other way round. Following this, I think we need to flesh out the Necron army a bit and make it a battle to be proud of, aka finish the unfinished boxes in the new colour scheme. So I'm going to add at least the boarding patrol. I'm thinking about a second box of Immortals as well, maybe at some point, to add to the army. And then I would really like to tackle some larger Necron units. No award for guesses here. Probably we'll start with the 2 boxes shown in the sort of pile of shame clip from the last video. Beyond that, look, there's probably going to be a monolith at some point. All right, it's probably going to happen. I haven't talked myself into it yet, but it's probably going to happen. Once we're done, we'll have an army that, fingers crossed, I can use in the new edition of 40k that's coming this summer, and hopefully we can find people to have some games with. On that note, I probably should say I've really struggled with 9th edition quite a lot. Didn't particularly enjoy it, and so I'm sort of hoping that when the new edition comes over, if I've got a completed army, it might be a nice excuse to sort of re-enter the sort of the gaming side of the hobby afresh. And fingers crossed, maybe this channel in time might give me the space to do that, or to bring some friends along the journey, I guess. So these are the guys that we're going to be repainting in this video. You can see that I kind of went for sort of a Martian desert look underneath. We did get 2 different varieties. So this one was a Vallejo texture paste covered in like an orangey colour and then quite heavily dry brushed. And this was with the Citadel, I think it's Iron Earth, Iron Crust something. Absolutely hated this. So whenever we do end up modelling bases, we'll be going back to texture paste and doing it that way. But the problem, all said, is I don't think these guys are really all that interesting. There's lots of metal. I think I quite like the weapons, the fact that there's a bit of colour difference going on there, I think it's quite cool. But all said, these shoulder pads are horrific. So if I just twist this one round here and make it the focus, you can see that there's this kind of emeraldy effect going on. The problem with this effect is that typically it takes 5 or 6 coats and it just never looked as good as I wanted it to. It also doesn't take to other colours of paints, which you can kind of see in my attempt to edge highlight here. And I've got to say as well, I do think on the whole the look just doesn't land quite in the way that I would have wanted. If, for comparison's sake, we take even just a small section of the larger tank model, we can see much more colour, much more vibrance. But here, the reason I wanted to show this is because this is where the emerald effect completely went to die. It looks awful and there is no way to save it. At least with the troops, a metre away on the tabletop looks okay. This, horrific. So we need a new green, and we also need to replicate this kind of blue colour, but we need to do that specifically on our troops. That's the aim. So yeah, I set up my table to get going. As this is my first video, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to try some different camera angles. I don't think any of them really worked. I think I need more height, more over the shoulder, and I need to think about where the camera can see. I should also say that this was the point that my camera stopped recording in 4K. Don't know why, but it did that. I'm going to have to roll with it because I can't exactly put them back to where they were before. So I really want to use contrast paints. They're an invention while I was on hobby hiatus, I suppose. So I think it'll be the best place to create detail in these small models without having to do too much work, I think. Again, I've said before, I don't have the steadiest hands. So I begin with the same blue from the Doomsday Arc, painted the rib sections of each model. It's required about 2 thin coats to get a good coverage. As the man said, we shall do. This was with the Vallejo's Andrea blue, which creates such a vibrant base for the contrast to work over. I'm actually really quite happy with this blue colour. I think it's just absolutely wonderful on models, and it really sells that kind of vibrancy that sometimes you're after. I then base coated over the green with Vallejo's Goblin Green. Honestly, have to say I kind of hate this colour as well as I did the original one, but I've decided to roll with it. It also took a few coats until it was showing a good coverage to work from. As we're only really doing the ribs and the shoulder pads, I managed to get through this in very little time. It's a good sign for the repainting of the rest of them that will follow, I suppose. So here we've got the first steps completed. I just stopped at this point and tried to do a bit of a show. Again, I don't think it's the best camera angle, but you know, improvements to come. And we can see that the shoulders are becoming almost an army green. I haven't decided whether I like this yet, but it's different. I'll give myself that. And the ribs look quite nice and vibrant. I quite like that as a start. So now I move to apply the contrast paint to the ribs. I'm using Akellen green. I think that's how it's pronounced. I've said it before, I'm dyslexic, so translating random letters put together by Games Workshop into noises is not something that I'm really capable of doing. So let's go with Akellen green. It's probably not that. Anywho, and this went over really nicely, I've got to say. It's overrun in a few places because I was tired and it was about 11 o'clock and I had work the next day. But honestly, it shows up so well, it doesn't bother me. It's a really nice effect, and actually when it dried, it became even nicer, enriching the colour that existed before and adding tons of definition. I really wish these contrast paints had existed when I was a teenager, because those Eldar would look okay and not like a defence project that I've got to start at some point to defend my right to be in the hobby. But never mind. I think this was a clear winner. Very, very happy with this. Then I moved to add some vibrancy to the green. I tried to do this by mixing in some yellow. It was Vallejo's Sun Yellow, a paint I actually really like for mixing. It seems to really do quite a good job of sort of lifting colours. This went some way to fix the problem with the green, but it still lacks some of the punch that I initially wanted. I messed about with mixing in some other shades and paints on my palette, but honestly I wasn't happy with the results of doing that either, so I just decided to try and roll with it. Wanting to make this first video and all, I tried to try my hand at some highlighting. As I said, I think in the initial video, part of the plan here is to try and get better. So I tried to do some highlighting by mixing in even more yellow and some other lighter paints into the green progressively and building some highlights. I generally really struggle with highlighting. There's a lot of tracing the edge of panels with the side of my brush and trying limitedly to find some lines I could follow. It, as can happen, did fade somewhat before it was finished. I did add some definition with I think it was about 3 coats of the highlight colour, but not as much as I would have liked, if I'm honest with you. And given that I struggled to keep my hand steady, this process took me a lot longer than the rest combined, and I think probably suffers from me sort of having to essentially rub out prior stages by trying to get the paint off with my thumb. I'm not sure it'll move on to the rest of the units as is, probably could do something slightly better there. Now we're looking at the final result. I'm happy, but I wouldn't say I'm ecstatic. I want to relook at those greens perhaps, or maybe just sleep on them for a day or two and see what I think, and consider how it can be changed for the better. Honestly, I expect I do need new paints in the green range, as I actually only have 2 greens, and neither of them particularly have performed as well as I would like, so that might be a trip down to Forbidden Planet or something, or maybe even the Games Workshop store in the next few days. The blue, however, I think looks great. It gives these models a real punch they didn't have before, a bit of colour and a bit of visual interest, so I'm really happy with that. So we've got our start complete. It's not the best work ever, it's only to a tabletop standard, but I mean, I don't think I could really do that much better. Feels like a win, step in the right direction. So, on to the next part of the project, I guess. Thanks for watching, and keep safe out there.